The governing body just released update number 4 for 2024. It seems that the relaxed dress code rules allowing women to wear pants and men to have beards and not wear coats and ties is causing confusions and questions from Jehovah's Witnesses. The way governing body member Jeffrey Winder presents the Watchtower's response to this confusion demonstrates the way the leadership uses gaslighting, control, bigotry, and misogyny to try and keep Jehovah's Witnesses in line. You ready? Let's get into it. We'll skip over the first part of the update and get right to the part where Jeffrey Winder talks about the updates to dress and grooming. Here's the first segment.
Recently, we've had updates about dress and grooming. We've talked about beards for brothers, slacks for sisters, and the use of jackets and ties for brothers. We're thankful that Jehovah trusts us in these matters. But some questions come up.
All right, let's stop there for a second. How do we know Jehovah trusts the governing body? Was there some sort of divine revelation? Did God speak from the sky his approval of the governing body the way he did at Jesus' baptism? No. This so-called trust from God is self-proclaimed. The monumental number of flip-flops and modified doctrines should cause any thinking person to realize that the governing body is clearly not trusted by God. And also the irony is that Watchtower teaches Jehovah's Witnesses not to trust humans. I can't tell you how many times I quoted Psalm 146:3, "Do not put your trust in princes, nor in the Son of Man, who cannot bring salvation." But now let's listen to Winder try to gaslight Jehovah's Witnesses about why the dress code changes were instituted.
First of all, do these adjustments about dress and grooming mean that we are lowering our standards? Not at all. Our worship of Jehovah deserves our deep respect and honor. These adjustments should not dilute the depth of our appreciation for serving Jehovah. More so, it's a recognition that styles change over time, and that what's considered acceptable, dignified dress for certain occasions also changes over time. For example, do you remember these images from the 2023 Governing Body Update number 8? We wouldn't expect that we would still dress as people did in Bible times, nor would we expect that we would still dress the same as people did 100 years ago. Times change. What's considered respectable and dignified dress and grooming changes over time. The adjustments announced in recent updates acknowledge that.
This is pure gaslighting. Winder's trying to make the viewer believe that the changes to the witness dress code aren't because the governing body is lowering their standards, but because what's socially acceptable has changed. That's simply not true. It's been socially acceptable for women to wear pants and for men not to wear a jacket or tie to church for decades. Do some women wear dresses and some men wear suits and ties to church still? Of course. But on the whole, society has not had an issue with not doing so for a very long time. And yet other churches still demand women wear skirts or dresses, some all the way down to the ankles, and that men wear suits. So who exactly is Watchtower trying to imitate if the change is due to social acceptance? Which part of society are they molding themselves after? And what happened to all that rhetoric about how Jehovah's Witnesses are supposed to be no part of the world and therefore should not be taking their social cues from the people outside? Of course, the real reason, in my opinion, that they're liberalizing and relaxing the rules is that the religion is just such a drag for younger people. According to a Pew Research survey, 2 out of 3 people born into the religion leave by the time they're adults in the United States. The opposite is true in evangelical churches and Mormons, where 2 out of 3 remain in the church when they're adults. Watchtower and the governing body see the writing on the wall. They're bleeding members badly, and I believe they hope to stop that bleeding by making the religion seem less severe and restrictive for younger people. But if that's their goal, it's not going to work. Evangelicals often have strict dress codes, as do Mormons, and yet those groups have twice the retention rates of Jehovah's Witnesses. Muslims also have strict dress codes as a rule, and their retention rate is even better, with 3 out of 4 remaining in that religion. The religion of Jehovah's Witnesses have problems that beards and pants are not going to solve. But now let's listen to Winder contradict himself as he attempts to give scriptural guidance on what kind of clothes are acceptable at the Kingdom Hall.
Another question that arises with this new direction is, how do we make sure that we still dignify Jehovah and his worship when it comes to beards, slacks, and not wearing ties? As is the case with all dress and grooming, there are a variety of styles. Let's consider 3 principles from God's Word. You know these principles, and you love Jehovah. We know that they are important to you. So let's see how these verses can guide us when making decisions about our dress and grooming. First, let's consider 1 Timothy 2, 9 and 10. It reads, "Likewise, the women should adorn themselves in appropriate dress, with modesty and soundness of mind, not with styles of hair braiding and gold or pearls or very expensive clothing, but in the way that is proper for women professing devotion to God, namely through good works." From what we read in these verses, what should characterize our dress and grooming? Now, the world may choose clothing simply based on what's most comfortable. But as Christians, we have other things to consider. We profess devotion to God. As Christian men and women, we want our dress and grooming to glorify Jehovah. And so we choose styles that are appropriate, modest, and that reflect soundness of mind, especially when we go to the Kingdom Hall or in the ministry.
The fact that Winder even has to present any kind of scriptural guidance on how Jehovah's Witnesses should dress and groom themselves just demonstrates the level of micromanagement the Watchtower has over the lives of the people in the religion. Do grown adults really need the governing body to tell them how to trim their beards or what kind of pants or clothes are respectable and acceptable to wear at the Kingdom Hall? Well, they seem to think they do. Also, did you notice how Winder contradicted himself? At the start of the video, he said that what's acceptable in society has changed, and so Jehovah's Witnesses need to change with it. But now he just said that Jehovah's Witnesses shouldn't change how they look based on what the world does, which he says is simply to wear what's most comfortable. So which is it? Are Jehovah's Witnesses changing based on what society now deems acceptable or not? And again, which segment of society does Watchtower want Jehovah's Witnesses to imitate exactly? Because I can tell you that while there are, of course, segments of society that dress slovenly or in a very relaxed way, just take a walk downtown where I live and you'll see a lot of very well-dressed people too. I've also visited many come-as-you-are churches, and I didn't see very many people wearing clothing I would describe as comfort-focused. Comfort, while important, isn't always the world's preferred choice. Many people like to look sharp and dress in a way that complements their body. Winder paints the entire planet with a broad brush of assumptions that simply aren't true across the board. It might be true for some, but not for others. So again, which part of society are Jehovah's Witnesses supposed to be imitating if the reason for the dress code change was social acceptance? All right, let's play the next segment and let Winder keep digging his hole.
What do these terms mean? Let's consider some of the study notes on these verses. For the term appropriate, the study note explains it this way: or respectable. In this context, the Greek word used suggests dress that would be considered honorable and proper. Such attire would be suitable for one who professes to be a minister of God. If our clothes are revealing or tight, would that be appropriate, honorable, or proper? Would that be suitable to wear when worshiping Jehovah? I'm sure you would agree that it would not be appropriate. That means that we need to carefully evaluate what we will wear, especially when we are worshiping Jehovah.
Here Winder says that the bottom line is for Jehovah's Witnesses' clothing to be respectable, honorable, and proper for worship. That makes sense, and I wouldn't disagree with that. But then he says that if our clothes are revealing or tight, that wouldn't be appropriate. But those terms are vague and subjective. How long should a woman's skirt be if she still chooses to wear one? How much skin is too much? How tight of a suit on a man or pants on a woman is too tight? Shouldn't these kinds of things just be left to the individual to determine based on their own Bible-trained conscience, as they like to say? And if so, why discuss these things at all? The governing body already made the proclamation, without any scriptural citations, that women can wear pants and men don't have to wear coats and ties. Since it clearly wasn't a change based on any kind of scripture, why not just leave it at that and let individual Jehovah's Witnesses decide without any further guidance? I think there are two primary reasons why they're doing this. One, the watchtower is all about control, and so feels the need to dictate how their new proclamations should be understood. They just can't help themselves. Very little is left to the individual witness's own preference in that religion. Second, I believe these changes are causing problems in congregations. I've read reports on EXJW Reddit and elsewhere of various congregation members and elders taking issue with the new rules, with one report stating that their congregation elder said not to abide by Watchtower's changes until further clarification was received. Based on my own experience, I have no doubt that many of the older witnesses are none too pleased with these changes, especially given how hard Watchtowers pushed that being no part of the world means not looking like the world. They said that my entire time in the religion. 40 years from birth till I was 40 years old, they taught we had to look different. I was always so proud that I could spot a group of Jehovah's Witnesses anytime I was traveling based on how they were dressed and groomed. And I'm not talking about when they were out in service. I would see people in restaurants or at different tourist spots and could usually identify them as Jehovah's Witnesses because we did look different. You can't do that now. Now, if you put a witness following the new rules next to a person going to most any other church, you couldn't hardly tell them apart. That's got to be a problem for some old school witnesses. All right, let's listen to Winder go into even more detail about what is and isn't appropriate for Jehovah's Witnesses.
If our clothes are casual, would that be appropriate for us to wear when worshiping Jehovah at the meetings or when in the ministry? Well, no, that wouldn't be appropriate. Of course, I'm sure you would agree that what's considered appropriate also depends on the occasion. For example, there are clothes that are appropriate for when we go to the beach or on a picnic. And there are clothes that are appropriate for when we attend a wedding. And there are also clothes that are appropriate for when we go to worship at the Kingdom Hall or in the ministry. What's the point? Although styles change over time, it's good for us to recognize that there are different levels of dress that should be decided based on the occasion. That's an idea we all want to keep in mind. Let's consider the next study note. What does it mean to dress with modesty? The study note says, in this context, modesty includes taking into consideration one's own conscience as well as the feelings or opinions of others. A modest Christian would avoid adornment that is considered indecent, that draws undue attention, or that is likely to offend or stumble others. So when making decisions, we consider how others would be affected, our brothers and sisters, as well as the community.
Winder here says that what's appropriate is dependent on the occasion, contrasting what a person wears to the beach versus what they would wear to a wedding. I agree with that, even though that should be obvious to anyone with the mental capacity of a snail. And he then says that how a person dresses should take into consideration other people's feelings and opinions about it. I don't particularly disagree with that either, though I would say there's a limit on how that should be applied. Some people are just easily offended and stumbled, and those people should just be ignored. One of Winder's comments I have to take issue with, though. He said that individual witnesses shouldn't dress in a way that draws undue attention to themselves. My problem with that is that it penalizes brothers and sisters who are more physically attractive, either because of how they look naturally or because they're fit and take care of themselves. Those people are going to draw more attention, especially if they dress in a way that complements their bodies. It doesn't have to be immodest or revealing to do that. A brother who keeps himself in shape and wears a suit that fits well is going to draw attention from sisters and closeted brothers, let's be real here. A sister who takes care of herself or is just naturally shapely and wears anything that fits better than a burlap sack is also going to draw attention. They shouldn't be penalized for being fit and attractive. In my opinion, this will just provide fuel to elders to enforce their own dress code on congregation members. They'll be able to point to Winder's words and tell Jehovah's Witnesses that are taking advantage of the relaxed rules that they're stumbling or offending people by the way they're dressing, that it's not acceptable here locally. The elder bodies will use this to start creating their own rules for that specific congregation. All right, next segment.
Of course, we would not be displaying modesty if our style of dress or grooming was viewed as odd or extreme. We don't want to draw undue attention to ourselves or distract others by the way we dress or groom ourselves. We want all attention to go to Jehovah and the kingdom message that we proclaim. Let's consider the next study note. What does the term soundness of mind mean? The study note says it refers to good judgment, sensibleness. This quality helps us to avoid appearing sloppy or untidy. To illustrate, imagine you were invited to a formal reception with government officials. How would you dress? Would you wear your pajamas or something you would wear to the beach? Definitely not. We would want to dress in a way that showed respect for the occasion and for those present. How much more so when we worship Jehovah at the meetings or when we share in the ministry?
I have the same problem with this segment as with the last. Who gets to decide if the way a person is dressed is odd or extreme? Those terms are very subjective. If there's not a specific set of rules, how long the skirt should be, how tight is too tight, how relaxed is too comfortable, then why not just leave it alone and let people decide for themselves? Okay, now the next segment reveals the bigotry of Winder and the Watchtower against all other religions, so let's check that out.
Let's consider a second Bible principle. It's found at 2 Corinthians 6, 3 and 4. In no way are we giving any cause for stumbling, so that no fault may be found with our ministry. But in every way we recommend ourselves as God's ministers. It's good for us to analyze how our dress and grooming will affect the way others view our ministry and the God we worship. After all, people may form an opinion of the truth, good or bad, based on our appearance. We can ask ourselves, in this part of the territory, would the neighbors view me as one of God's ministers if I dress or groom myself this way? Would they see the distinction between Jehovah's people and those who do not serve God?
So again, Winder says that how Jehovah's Witnesses dress should be based on what is socially acceptable by the people they witness to in the ministry. At the start of the video, he said the updated dress code was because of changes in society. Then he said witnesses shouldn't dress in the comfort fashions of worldly people. And now he's again saying witnesses should base how they dress on what worldly people think about it. The flip-flop don't stop. But the worst part of this is his final statement in the segment. If I dress or groom myself this way, would they, the people in the territory, see the distinction between Jehovah's people and those who do not serve God? Here Winder implies that nobody else serves God, only Jehovah's Witnesses. The Watchtower teaches that all other religions are from Satan, part of Babylon the Great, what they call the world empire of false religion. In the eyes of witnesses, nobody else is serving God, only them. And yet, despite the fact that the people in the territory are godless heathens, apparently, the witnesses are supposed to dress according to the local opinion of what godly people should look like. Make it make sense. All right, on to Winder's third scriptural principle.
What's the third principle we'll consider? It's 1 John 2, 15 through 17. Do not love either the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Because everything in the world, the desire of the flesh and the desire of the eyes and the showy display of one's means of life, does not originate with the Father, but originates with the world. Furthermore, the world is passing away, and so is its desire. But the one who does the will of God remains forever. From these verses, we're reminded that our dress and grooming should not reflect a love of the world. Styles change over the years, and there are a wide variety of styles that are not offensive to most people. Our publications have often stated that we should not be the first to adopt a new style or the last to abandon an old one. But we all know that there are many styles that we would never want to adopt, especially those that are immodest, sensual, careless, or sloppy. And to be honest, we need to consider not just the style of the garment, but also whether that garment fits in a modest way.
This is just more of the same contradiction. The dress code is changing because of the world, but witnesses should be no part of the world. They're not supposed to love the world or the things in the world, but their dress code should be based on what's acceptable to worldly people in the territory, unless, of course, what's acceptable is immodest, sensual, careless, or sloppy, in which case forget what the world thinks and wear a burlap bag. He also says that clothes should fit in a modest way. If you've ever been one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you know what that means. If you're fit, it shouldn't show. If you're curvy, you should try to hide it. You should be ashamed of your body rather than wearing clothes that show you to be the attractive person you are. That doesn't require being immodest or showing a lot of skin. It just means wearing clothes that actually fit rather than clothes that are loose or ill-fitting. All right, on to the final segment.
We would never want to show disrespect for Jehovah or his righteous standards. We've considered 3 Bible principles that can help us make good decisions about our dress. Of course, these same principles apply to hairstyles, beards, and to all the ways we dress and groom ourselves. They help us to determine the length and style of our hair. Brothers use them to determine how to groom their beards so that they look sharp and well cared for. And aren't we grateful that Jehovah has given us these principles in His Word? It's so good to review them in view of the recent adjustments. But what else should we do with these reminders? Pray about them. Ask Jehovah to help you see if any changes are needed. Ask a spiritually mature friend for honest comments. And family heads, show your love for your wife and children by helping them to apply these principles.
We should never want to show disrespect for Jehovah or his righteous standards, says Winder. Okay, but these relaxed dress codes weren't based on any righteous standard found in the Bible. As you'll recall, it was just,
the governing body has decided.
So that doesn't make any sense. Jeffrey Winder read 3 passages to try and clarify how Jehovah's Witnesses can dress. 1 Timothy 2:9 and 10, which says that women shouldn't braid their hair or wear gold or pearls or expensive clothes, but sisters can braid their hair and wear gold and pearls. Why doesn't that part of the verse apply while the rest does? Watchtower claims the Bible is infallible and inerrant, which means the words in the verse all apply. And there are some evangelical churches that do apply those words quite strictly. There were such groups in rural Louisiana where I lived for a while. We met them out in service all the time. No braids, no gold, no pearls, plain clothes with skirts that went all the way down to the ankles. Then he partially quoted 2 Corinthians 6, 3 and 4. In no way are we giving any cause for stumbling, so that no fault may be found with our ministry. But in every way we recommend ourselves as God's ministers. But he left off the rest. By the endurance of much, by tribulations, by times of need, by difficulties. That passage wasn't talking about clothing at all. If you read all the way to verse 10, it's clear that the passage is about all of the hardships that will be endured by Christians and the kind of attitude they should display despite it. Not once is clothing ever mentioned. But this is how the Watchtower works. They partially quote scriptures and cite verses that simply don't apply to what's being said if you read the context. And finally, he quotes John 2:15 through 17, which says not to love the world or the things in the world. And yet, multiple times in the video, he says the relaxed dress code is due to the changing world standards of what's considered acceptable. If the dress code for Jehovah's Witnesses is being set, not by the governing body's decree, but by changing worldly standards, how are Jehovah's Witnesses fulfilling that scripture? Keep in mind, I think it's absolutely fine for women to wear pants to church and for men not to wear a coat and tie. I'm just pointing out the contradiction in Winder's reasoning here. And the last thing I want to point out is notice how Winder said that the heads of the household, the husband, should tell his wife and kids how they should be dressing. So apparently the wife is just another child in his family who needs to be told what it's okay for her to wear or not. The religion of Jehovah's Witnesses is highly misogynistic, and you see things like that slip in videos like these. Well, there you have it. The governing body is certainly losing their way with all these updates. They're trying to relax their rules to keep younger people in, while also not offending or confusing the older members who were taught something very different over the years. What will come of all this nonsense? What do you think? I'd love to know. Be sure to leave a comment below with your thoughts, to like the video, and subscribe to my channel. If you want to support the work I'm doing, click the join button below. If you don't see the join button, it's because you're not subscribed yet, so do that first. And as always, thanks for watching.